Good Saturday morning to you. I'm Danilo Evangelista, and welcome to our weather update for January 24th, 2026. We're going to be going over the latest on the major winter storm that is now brewing across the south right now, and it's definitely beginning to ramp up with heavy snowfall beginning to occur for many across the south, and also, a lot of that freezing rain and sleet as well, which is going to be, one of the many issues that we're going to be dealing with this crippling winter storm that will be impacting a lot of people as we progress throughout the weekend. So, without further ado, let's get started by taking a look at the latest radar loop. And let me really quickly refresh the page to make sure I have the very latest frame possible. And you can see definitely, a storm that is ramping up. We have sleet occurring right now across portions of southern Arkansas, and some bands as well of freezing rain beginning to develop on the northern portions of Louisiana and northwestern Mississippi. And those are some of the areas, among two of the areas that have the highest risk for pretty decent ice accumulations, or I should say specifically freezing rain accumulations. You can already see as well that the freezing rain is occurring there. And then to the north of that, where we have colder air, in fact, the temperatures are very cold, as I'm going to show you in just a little bit. We have snow, and you could already see we have some decent snow banding occurring across Tennessee and northern Arkansas, and some of these snow bands stretch their way all the way up into northern Missouri and maybe even very far south clips of Iowa, and then stretch back into Oklahoma and Nebraska. And Oklahoma last night got a pretty decent amount of snowfall. Not exactly sure the exact amounts yet, but they're in a little bit of a dry slot right now after getting a pretty decent amount of snowfall. But you see, there's a little bit more precipitation back to the west here, as we will continue to see a feed of tropical moisture coming from the Pacific, which is fueling this entire storm, and we'll continue to see moisture, feed in from the southwest, and any kind of dry spots that we have here through central northern Texas and Oklahoma will fill in, and we're probably going to see some more heavier snow bands as we go throughout the rest of the day into tomorrow. I'll show you the models in a little bit, and I'll show you how we'll develop a very widespread snow field, and it stretches all the way from Texas all the way to potentially northern Virginia and the Northeast. Once the storm gets fully ramped up by tonight and into tomorrow, it's quite a tremendous, amazing sight to see, and this is going to be a pretty impactful storm, and it's already beginning for many people across the South right now. And just to keep you up to date on the latest watches and warnings, winter storm warnings in effect all the way from Massachusetts and Vermont, stretching all the way down to Texas and Oklahoma, where that's potentially the swath of where we will see accumulating snow, and a pretty decent amount of it as well. And then we also have the ice storm warnings in effect for Louisiana, eastern Texas, and of course central and northwestern Mississippi. And of course, that is one spot right here where we're going to see a lot of ice accumulations, and then we're also going to see a lot of ice as well throughout northern Georgia, South Carolina, and North Carolina, and potentially stretching into Virginia too. But then they're under a winter storm warning right now. And then we also have extreme cold warning still in effect for portions of the northern Midwest and Great Lakes, where they're dealing with frigid cold temperatures. In fact, let's actually show you the temperatures right now. And you can see this is the latest temperature reading as of 10 a.m. And I'm using the site Windy. And you can just see just how expansive and massive the cold air is. And you can see that by the blue line. You can kind of trace where the blue line is here on the map. And that is I believe that is the 32 degree line, which represents where temperatures are 32 degrees or lower right now. And that line stretches as far southward as the Texas-Mexico border. In fact, there are even some towns here in southern Texas, San Angelo, Texas, at 25 right now, but we even have some temperatures here getting as far south as the Texas-Mexico border down to 32 degrees. Low 30s and 20s all the way up into northern Louisiana, and of course that's where we have ice developing right now. We also have temperatures below freezing, of course, in central northern Mississippi. That's where we're also beginning to see ice right now, and very, very cold temperatures, especially as we get into Arkansas. Little Rock at 14, Amarillo, Texas at 5, Dallas at 30, and it's probably only going to get colder from here on out. And then as we get up into the northern portions of the United States, let's go to the Northeast first. Interior New England already in the negatives, not just the single digits, but the negatives. Boston is in the single digits. In fact, they're just at 1 degree, so they're just barely above freezing, or above zero, or definitely well below freezing. And for most across the Northeast, it's going to stay that way for not just the entire weekend as we get this storm moving through, but probably throughout a good chunk, if not almost the entirety of next week. We're going to be below zero or below freezing, and potentially multiple days as well, where we're going to see these below zero temperatures, especially as overnight lows. So it's going to be brutal, and it gets even worse, especially as we get into the northern Great Lakes. Lansing, Michigan, right now at -11. Green Bay, Wisconsin, -20. Madison, Wisconsin, -13. And then let's see, what's the highest temperature, the lowest temperature I could see here? I guess Leeds, where is that? Leeds, North Dakota at -26. So bottom line, very, very cold air mass, and obviously this is feeding into the major winter storm right now for many across the United States. But I also want to show you a satellite view of how things are looking like right now. And first of all, you could just see the massive moisture field and see where all the moisture is coming from. It's coming from, of course, the Baja Peninsula and the Pacific, and this is direct tropical moisture coming from the Pacific, so a lot of moisture to work with, and of course it's going to result in a very, very expansive precipitation field, as I'll once again show you in the models. But very interestingly enough, we also have some pretty decent convective activity happening right now in the northwestern Gulf Coast, near southern Texas and southern Louisiana. And let me actually flip back to the radar frame here, and you could actually see looks like maybe some thunderstorms trying to form just off the coast of Houston, Texas and southwestern Louisiana. And so they're definitely staying on the warmer side. I think temperatures are in the 50s and 60s. So they're probably not going to get any or much of the frozen precipitation. Let's actually go back to the forecast here. And while they do actually have extreme cold warnings, so probably they're going to cool down eventually, but right now it looks like they're on the warmer side of things. And because of that, they're producing convection. And this convection, by the way, is something that we're going to have to watch, especially as this progresses northward, because we're going to have to see where convective activity sets up, especially in the Northeast, so we can see where our heaviest snow bands will set up, and that'll impact the snow totals for the Northeast, especially if you're along the I-95 corridor. But we're going to get to that in just a moment. Actually, we'll get to that right now, since I'll show you the models. And I'm going to start off with the NAM 3 kilometer. Not going to do the global models today, since now we are pretty much about a day out from the storm occurring, especially if you're in the Northeast, and the storm is already occurring now, especially if you are in parts of the South. So we are definitely within time frame to be able to use the mesoscale radar models for this system. So that's what we're going to do. So here's the NAM 3 kilometer, initialized as of 12Z today, so 7 a.m. Eastern time. And let's take you out and see what the NAM shows. And you can see throughout the day today, the system continues to progress. As it moves eastward, we get a pretty decent band of freezing rain to set up over central and northern Mississippi and Louisiana. And then eventually that spreads eastward, and we start seeing freezing rain as we get into the overnight hours tonight into tomorrow morning, into eastern Tennessee, and of course into the Carolinas. And we also have, besides freezing rain, a lot of sleet. And then as we get into tomorrow morning, especially as we get into the mid to later morning hours, or I guess you can more or less say by daybreak. This is what the system develops into: a massive precipitation field with snow stretching all the way from Texas, northern Texas potentially. And they especially have some strong, heavy bands that move through in the overnight hours tonight into tomorrow morning, and that moves on into Oklahoma. So you can see here how, especially as we get more of that moisture to tap in from the southwest, eventually all of these dry spots begin to develop into more banding. And so, Oklahoma, you're not done yet when it comes to the snowfall. You're probably going to get a lot more, and then eventually, again, it's going to expand and eventually connect into this massive precipitation field that stretches, again, from Texas, Oklahoma, up into the Midwest. Pretty much, at least the snow portion of this, messy system is going to stretch throughout pretty much the entirety of the northern half of the Ohio River Valley. And then eventually, especially as we get into early Sunday morning, snow for Philadelphia. It's already been snowing for several hours in D.C., and snow is just beginning in New York City. And then as we get into the late morning and early afternoon, heaviest snow strikes the I-95 corridor from Philly to New York. And then eventually we start getting a lot of that heavy snow to make its way as well into southern New England and into Boston. And then New York City begins to feel some of the sleet here, and definitely Philly and D.C., especially as we get into the late afternoon and evening hours of tomorrow. And so that might mess with the snow totals a little bit, especially, if you're in New York City and south. And the NAM is very aggressive on the sleet. In fact, it actually has it getting as far north as, decently into Connecticut and southern New England. And in fact, you could almost see here on the model, it almost looks like they try to even bring the sleet as far north as maybe close to Boston, but I'm not entirely too sure about that, as I'll show you in just a moment. And then eventually, once the sleet gets that far north, we see a lot of dry air begin to entrain on the western side, and so that pretty much shuts off the system for New York City, and points south and east of that by the time we get to 10, 11 o'clock tomorrow night. But on the flip side, especially for northern New England, you could even see here that light snow showers, even as the system moves off to the east, remain well into Monday. In fact, here's Monday evening at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, and on model time, it is at 0Z Tuesday already, and there's still some snow showers occurring over far northern New England, especially Maine. So I definitely say northern New England, upstate New York, and probably as well like northern PA too, probably going to be in the jackpot for where you guys will see the heaviest snow totals, easily upwards of above a foot, maybe in some areas getting into the upper teens in terms of snow totals in inches. So, if you are a snow lover and you love that and you love a lot of snow, enjoy it, because you guys are going to have a lot of fun with this. And, even for New York City and, maybe points south, including northern New Jersey and maybe even Philly, we're still probably going to get some decent snow totals. I still think New York City could probably see up to 10 inches of snow, but I'll show you the forecast in just a little bit. In fact, I have it showing up here right now. But it's a little bit of a debate, because the NAM has sleet getting into the city. In fact, let's see when the sleet begins to get in. It's already beginning to move into New York City at roughly 2 in the afternoon. And, this is definitely the most aggressive solution I'll tell you when it comes to the sleet. But I'm not sure I entirely buy that. And the reason why I say that is because I found this interesting tweet from Tomer Berg, a very well-respected guy that I like, and he's, very intelligent and stuff, on X, or if you want to call it Twitter. And he posted this last night, but also a number of people posted similar things I saw, at least on my Twitter feed last night as well. And basically what he's saying is that He was looking at the radar observations in Oklahoma last night, and he said that he believes that compared to what the models show, or compared to what the models were showing last night versus what radar actually showed, he said that the HRRR and RGEM are slightly too far south with the snow sleet line, but the NAM is slightly too far north. So maybe, especially if you're trying to make a comparison between what is actually happening in reality versus what the NAM is showing as a model, maybe you could say that the NAM is indeed being a little bit too aggressive with the sleet line here, especially in the Northeast, especially if they're trying to take the sleet all the way up to Boston. And that is something I definitely doubt. But again, regardless, we're going to get some pretty decent snow totals. In fact, let's actually show you what the National Weather Service forecasts. 10 inches, almost 11 inches for Philadelphia, 9 inches for Wilmington, and I'm pretty sure they also forecast a pretty decent amount of snowfall as well for the DC area, but probably around 7 to 9 inches, at least from what I could see from this map. I should have brought up the map for DC, but I'm pretty sure it's still pretty decent. But 10 inches for Philadelphia, 10.5 for Trenton, central, north central, New Jersey coastline, 9 to 10 inches, and then eventually as you get into northern New Jersey, you get above a foot of snow, and then let's actually flip. Well, I'll show you that in a little bit, but actually, because, we are expecting potentially some sleet and maybe even a little bit of freezing rain to mix in. There is also ice potential, especially across central and southern New Jersey and into Delaware and into northern Maryland, where the total accumulation for ice potentially up to 1/4 of an inch in Vineland, potentially up to a third of an inch in Easton, and this is in Maryland, and then a fraction as we get into central and northern New Jersey. Because I'm pretty sure probably once we get to, especially the city area and Long Island, any mixing that will happen will probably be mostly sleet and not necessarily freezing rain. So I guess it won't be as destructive on the snow totals because you can see here, National Weather Service still forecasting a foot of snow for the city. And that's what I personally think. I still think New York City is going to get above 10 inches. I don't really buy the forecasts, and some people saying that sleet will be enough of an issue that New York City might be below 10 inches. In fact, some people saying New York City will get maybe only 6 or 7 inches. I don't really buy that. I still think it's actually going to be pretty decent, and you can see from the NAM model, especially that initial thump of snow, and I went over it yesterday. We're going to get a pretty powerful band that'll probably dump a pretty good amount of snow for several hours, especially late Sunday morning into the early afternoon, and that'll probably bring quite a bit of snow, enough so that any sleet that does happen, it's probably not going to amount to much comparatively to the amount of snow we will have gotten earlier on in the day. But National Weather Service still forecasting 12 inches for the city, and in general 10 to 11 across Long Island. But obviously, the further north you go, the less you're going to mix. And as we get into southern New England and into lower upstate New York, totals definitely easily getting above a foot. And then as we get further north than that, potentially as we get into the Boston area, looks like Boston is potentially going to hit the jackpot with this, or at least, in the very least, probably be among the areas that will get higher amounts. National Weather Service still forecasting up to 1.5 feet for you guys, and especially as I showed you with the NAM, where more than likely, the snow will probably last for much longer, especially in far northern New England. And probably some of that will also have to do with the fact that, we might have a little bit of an enhancing factor from the ocean to, ocean effect snow, and that'll probably add an inch or two. But seemingly the models, especially for northern New England, still keep light snow showers throughout most of the day on Monday. So I guess that will indeed keep you guys with the higher snow totals, and then potentially still up to 10 inches maybe as we get further south and into Nantucket, and then slightly above an inch as we get into Plymouth, Cape Cod, the general Cape Cod area, and Provincetown at 15 inches. So that's the snow accumulations. What about the ice, on the other hand, since that is also the biggest threat? And as you can see here, especially once again, eastern Texas, central northern Louisiana, northwestern Mississippi, and into Tennessee. Especially today is when the ice will be the biggest threat. And in fact, let's go back to the radar here. You can already see these ice bands beginning to develop over northern Louisiana and northwestern Mississippi. So ice is going to be the biggest issue for you guys today. Over a 75% chance of quarter of an inch of ice accumulation, and some areas might see up to a full inch of ice accumulation depending on where you are. And then as we head into tomorrow, the threat mainly then focuses on the Carolinas, stretching from South Carolina up into potentially Virginia, where we could see some pretty decent ice accumulations too. And of course, ice, we got to hope that some of this potentially is, instead of, ice, it ends up being sleet, but 70% chance of potentially at least a quarter of an inch of ice. Very, very hazardous. So if you guys are anywhere that is expected to get hazardous weather, whether it be ice accumulation or heavy snow today and or tomorrow, please, my advice to you is to stay home. Do not go out unless you absolutely need to do so. And most importantly, stay warm. And, especially if you are in an area where that will experience heavy snow, make sure to enjoy it, because this will definitely be a winter storm that'll be remembered for probably years to come, because it is going to be quite an impactful one. All right, but I think that's a wrap for the winter storm part of today's video. Now, let's move on to the tropics, because obviously a typical Saturday video for me is not complete without at least talking a little bit about the tropics, since that's what I mainly focus on with this channel. And so let's go over what the sea surface temperature anomalies currently are. And I know we're going from winter weather, bitter cold, ice and heavy snow, and now we're talking about the tropics. And I know probably a lot of you watching will probably rather much prefer that right now, but just mainly going to talk about sea surface temperature anomalies right now, since that's all we really got to talk about. And what do you see? La Nina continuing to persist here in the Pacific, although it is dying out. You can see definitely a lot more of these warmer or at least neutral sea surface temperature anomalies beginning to fill in the further east you go along the equatorial Pacific. So definitely means that La Nina is on its way out soon. Meanwhile, in the Atlantic, sea surface temperature anomalies remain very, very warm, especially in the Gulf and the Caribbean. And as we get into the subtropical Atlantic here, and this will definitely be interesting to watch as we head into the rest of the winter and into spring. And if this persists into the hurricane season, maybe it'll definitely make for an interesting hurricane season forecast, especially if we have very, very warm sea surface temperature anomalies. And the situation with the El Nino, we'll see what happens, and maybe might get another scenario where the Atlantic is very warm this year, especially if sea surface temperature anomalies continue to warm, especially if they warm quite a bit in the eastern Atlantic, which they probably will, especially once we get to June and July and the African monsoon really begins to ramp up. So we'll probably see things warm then. So we'll really have to then watch how strong El Nino will get, of course, if it does happen. Although right now, if we look at the SOI, with the latest value, at least in terms of the long-term averages today, the latest SOI average is at 8.7 points positive for 30 days. And then over the last 90 days, the SOI is at positive 7. So atmospherically, that means, or at least that tells me, that so far we are still very much in La Nina territory atmospherically, because the SOI is kind of a measure of the pressure patterns in the Pacific, and obviously that does have a lot to do with ENSO and El Nino. The atmosphere is all connected in one way or another, and as long as this remains positive, we're still definitely atmospherically more like a La Nina than we are an El Nino. So at least that tells me for now La Nina is holding on. The daily calculation of the SOI, though, pretty strongly negative, and so that might factor into the averages a little bit, and we'll probably see them go down over the next week or so. But still positive right now, meaning La Nina is holding on. And then finally, taking a look at the latest weekly CPC value, because the CPC themselves does a weekly, update on ENSO conditions, and I have the slide posted for where their latest weekly ENSO value is. Oh, it's right here. The latest weekly ENSO value that the CPC has, at least in the Nino 3.4 region, it is still holding strong at negative 0.7 degrees Celsius, and obviously the Nino 3.4 is the region we watch in the Pacific for monitoring how ENSO is doing. So if that is still decently cold at negative 0.7, that still means that La Nina is holding on for now. So we'll continue to watch that over the next several weeks, but obviously over the next several days, we have a winter storm that is going on, and we'll definitely continue to keep you updated on that. May or may not post a video later today going on, whatever developments happen, especially if, anything interesting happens with the models as it relates to maybe potentially snowfall in the Northeast. So may or may not do that later today, but I definitely will do an update video tomorrow on whatever happens with the snow, especially as by tomorrow it'll probably be moving into portions of the I-95 corridor and the Northeast, and definitely, beginning to spread as well throughout large chunks of the Midwest in the Ohio Valley too. So we'll obviously go over and have an update for you tomorrow. So if you want to stay tuned for that, please make sure to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already done so. And of course, subscribe to my channel if you also want to see other content as well, especially if you are interested in tropical weather content. I do a lot of that, especially as we get towards the summer. So make sure to stay tuned for that. But that's going to wrap it up for today's video. Hope you enjoyed it. Stay warm, stay safe, and I'll talk to you guys again very soon.